Hi, everyone, and welcome to the 58th episode of Vitals and Voices. I'm Lathika, and I'm the founder and host. Vitals and Voices brings together generations of people involved in healthcare to foster a supportive and connected community. Now, please welcome our guest, Maria Jimena Barroso. Jimena, thank you so much for joining us today. We're thrilled to have you on Vitals and Voices. To start, feel free to kind of introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about what you do.
Hi, yes, of course. Thank you so much for having me. I'm really happy to be here. So, my name is Maria Jimena Barroso, but I go by Jimena. I'm a medical student from Mexico, currently completing my final year of training here in the United States. Alongside medical school, I'm involved in clinical research and academic projects, and I've had the opportunity to train in different clinical settings, both in Mexico and the United States. I'm especially passionate about women's health, reproductive care, maternal outcomes, and gynecological cancers. I'm an aspiring OB-GYN with plans to pursue my residency training in the United States. And I'm really grateful to be part of this conversation and to share a bit about my journey.
Wonderful. Thank you for being here. So, what inspired you to pursue medicine, and how did your experiences growing up in Mexico shape your career path?
So honestly, since the first time I can remember being asked like why I wanted to be what I wanted to be when I grew up, my answer was always the same. I wanted to be a doctor. It wasn't something I discovered like later on. It's like I felt like it was a vocation since a very young age. For a long time, I actually like disliked the typical answer of I want to be a doctor because I want to help people. So I used to say that what really drew me to medicine was like curiosity. I've always been someone who asks why, like why the body works the way it does, why things go wrong, and like how everything connects in the body. So curiosity was my first like doorway into medicine. So as I grew older and started my medical training, I realized that curiosity wasn't the whole story. So over time, I understood that there was nothing wrong with wanting to help people. In fact, that desire had always been part of who I am, and even if I didn't have the words for it early on. So wanting to understand people, care for them, and support them through like their vulnerable moments became like my real motivation, and the realization has pushed me forward like throughout my training. And about growing up in Mexico, how it shaped my path in a way. Well, I have had the opportunity to train in both the public and the private healthcare, and it became very clear how strained the public system in Mexico is. It's often overwhelmed, underfunded, there's limited resources, which it obviously deeply affects how access and quality of care. So seeing that really made me medicine feel bigger than an individual like career decision. It made me want to train at the highest level possible and learn from the strongest systems and eventually bring back the knowledge I gained and give it back to Mexico, like contribute. And even if it's in a small way. So improving healthcare for the communities that need it the most. And well, that's the really what continues to guide the choices I'm making today.
I love that. So,
Thank
you've seen firsthand how structural inequalities can affect women's health. How does that perspective influence your work in research and patient care?
So, as I said, like growing up training in Mexico made structural inequalities impossible to ignore. So, especially in the Mexican healthcare system, the public sector, as I said it before, is often overwhelmed, under resourced, which creates barriers to care. But those barriers are often worse for women. There's limited access, long wait times, and lack of continuity. And this affects women who are already carrying the weight of caregiving, economic vulnerability, and their social expectations. So, beyond access, I also notice how women's symptoms are frequently minimized or reframed. And many times, women are told that their pain is like normal, it's hormonal, or it's related to stress or mental health even when there is like an underlying medical condition that deserves like a proper evaluation. So there's a tendency to normalize women's suffering in a way that doesn't happen as often with men. And that deeply affects their outcomes because when patients aren't taken seriously, diagnoses are delayed and the trust in the system like breaks down. So this is something I'm currently exploring in my research as well. I'm particularly doing right now a paper working on what is described as obstetric violence in Mexico, where these like dynamics are not only common but often severe, and they're normalized within the healthcare system. So seeing this firsthand shaped how I think about both research and patient care. It has pushed me towards women's health research because so many, as I said, so many conditions affecting the woman remain underdiagnosed, understudied, or misunderstood. So research for me is like a way to generate evidence that validates women's experience and challenges assumptions that have been accepted for like very long time. And clinically, this perspective has taught me the importance of listening carefully and asking better questions and like resisting the urge to oversimplify symptoms. So I try to approach each patient with the assumption that what they're feeling is real and deserves to be understood. So recognizing these inequalities has like reinforced my commitment to advocate for women, not only by providing care, but by contributing to a system that takes their health seriously. So this is how the like that perspectives continue to guide how I approach research and patient care.
I love that. And I also agree with you when you were talking about how sometimes women get pushed down when they, come in for a visit and then they're just told by the doctor it's just, hormonal issues or even just stress. So I really agree with what you said, and I think research and patient care can definitely just help alleviate that, like I don't know what's the word for it, but like empowerment and just being able to advocate for patients. And yeah, so I really love what you're doing.
Thank you.
Of course. So during medical school, you had a personal health challenge with thyroid cancer. How did being a patient change the way you approach medicine and patient care now?
So this actually connects very closely with what we were just talking about, because before my diagnosis, I was a patient whose symptoms were repeatedly undermined. So a little bit about my context. For a month, I went to doctors describing how I felt. I had some weird symptoms, and I was told it was anxiety, stress, or that it simply was the pressure of being a medical student. So my symptoms were explained away instead of like being explored. So my diagnosis ended up actually being completely accidental. I was in my radiology rotation. I was volunteering like as a student while learning how to use the thyroid ultrasound, and that's when a finding appeared on the screen. So one moment I was a student learning a skill, and the next I was being told I had thyroid cancer. So becoming a patient so suddenly reshaped the way I see medicine. I went from standing confidently beside the bed to lying in it. And well, that shift strips away a distance that many of us don't even realize we carry as like trainees or medical students. So I learned how heavy silence can feel in a room, how overwhelming medical language becomes when it is directed at you. And even if I was a medical student, so for patients that don't know the medical language, I imagine it must be much hard. And how reassurance can feel hollow if it isn't paired with genuine presence. So what changed me the most was being dismissed before being diagnosed. Yeah. Like nothing teaches you empathy faster than not being believed. So cancer didn't just take my thyroid, it removed the emotional like armor I didn't know I had. I learned what it feels like to hand your fear to a physician and hope they handle it with care and that they know what they're doing. Because of that experience, I listen differently now. I take symptoms seriously, even when they're vague or hard to explain. I will try when I'm a physician to be intentional about believing patients when they tell me something feels wrong. So I realized being a patient didn't make me weaker. It made me more aware, more human, and more intentional in how I care for others. So those lessons stay with me every time I walk into a patient's room and hear the patient. And I think it will continue to guide me throughout my career.
Definitely. And I love how that experience in your life helps motivate you and just helps you better advocate for your patients, just by sitting down with them and then chatting with them and then ensuring them the best care possible. So I really love, again, what you're doing.
Thank you.
Of course. So, you mentioned that your empathy drives your work. Can you share a moment during your training that reinforced that value for you?
Yeah. So empathy became very real to me during my training after, well, I had already experienced my illness. So after my diagnosis and treatments, I had the opportunity to rotate in oncology and ENT. And well, these were the doctors and specialties where I had once been a patient myself. So being on the other side of the rooms was like very grounding. There were moments where I watched patients receive a diagnosis and I could see it immediately. Like the pause, the silence, the way their face changes when they were told the diagnosis. So in those moments, I didn't imagine what they were feeling. Like I remember exactly what it felt like. So thyroid cancer, especially papillary, is often described as the good cancer, the one people say you're lucky to have if you had to choose. But there's nothing comforting about hearing the word cancer. No cancer feels good when it's your body and your future. So having lived that really allowed me to recognize the weight of that word in a way like no doctor can teach unless they experienced it. So those moments reinforced empathy for me in a very real way. They reminded me that every diagnosis, no matter how favorable the prognosis carries, it carries fear and loss. So being able to hold space for that, to understand it rather than minimize it, is something that continues to shape how I care for patients.
I love that. So, you're particularly passionate about reproductive health, maternal outcomes, and gynecological oncology. Why are these areas so important to you, and what changes do you hope to see in women's healthcare?
So these areas matter to me because we could say it's like an intersection, a combination of medicine, identity, and equity. And also because women's health has like historically been overlooked and minimized. Reproductive health and maternal outcomes shape not just individuals, but families and entire communities. And yet they are often treated like as secondary outcomes or routine rather than complex and deserving of investment. And in the other hand, gynecology, oncology, it's another layer where women are facing like life altering diagnosis while still navigating systems that don't always listen to or prioritize them. So throughout my training and my research, I've seen how gaps in access, delayed diagnosis, and lack of representation in research directly affects outcomes for women. So that's what drives my interest in these fields. They demand both clinical excellence and advocacy. So I hope to see healthcare systems where women are taken seriously from the first like symptoms to a long-term care.
Again, I love the work that you're doing, and I love how you just want to really advocate for patients and for women as well. So, again, really love the work that you're doing. I know I'm like repeating that over and over again, but honestly, I just love it.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So, can you tell us more about your work as an Ann C. Carter Global Health Fellow and the project you're leading on women's health education in post-disaster settings?
Yeah, of course. So the NC Carter Global Health Fellowships, as if you don't know what it is, it's a student-led project focused on advancing health equity in the underserved communities. It's organized by the American Medical Women Association. So through the fellowship, I'm leading a women's health education initiative that focuses on post-disaster settings, particularly in communities affected by natural disasters. And right now I'm starting my focus on Mexico. And my work it's built on experiences I've had organizing medical brigades with an organization I'm working for calling Health Allies after the Hurricane Otis, which was a hurricane in Acapulco like 3 years ago that completely destroyed the place. So this is where it became like very clear that care isn't enough. Like while immediate relief is critical, many women are left without information or like resources or continuity of care once the initial response ends. So what my project focuses on is like bridging the gap by integrating women-centered health education in post-disaster care. So this has an emphasis on maternal and reproductive health, health literacy, and long-term empowerment. So the goal of the project is to create a model that supports women not just in surviving a crisis, but in maintaining their health afterward. So this fellowship has given me the mentorship and like the framework to turn lived experience into structured action. And it's been a defining part of how I envision my future in global women's health.
Again, I love that, and I love how you were able to learn so much from that fellowship and be able to kind of lead on women's health education in those post-disaster settings. So, outside of medicine, you mentioned that you love to dance. How do activities like dance or art influence your resilience, empathy, or even perspective as a healthcare provider?
So dance has been a part of my life for as long as I can remember. I was never the best dancer in the room, but that never mattered to me. What mattered is how dance made me feel. So when I dance, I feel like present, free, grounded, happy. And that's something I carry into medicine as well. It reminds me that like joy and humanity matter just as much as performance or achievement. So also dance has taught me discipline and consistency. So like showing up, practicing even when the progress felt slow, and like trusting that small efforts add up over time are lessons that translate directly into medicine. Being a physician is like about commitment, patience, and showing up for people day after day. So in that sense, dance hasn't been separate from medicine for me. It shaped the kind of doctor I'm becoming.
I love that, and I definitely do agree. Dance is such a wonderful hobby to pursue. It definitely alleviates your stress, when you're working in medical environment. So, yeah. And how do you balance your clinical training, your research, and global health projects while continuing to grow as a future physician?
So that's complicated. It's not as easy as I make it look. But for me, balance doesn't come like from doing everything at once. It comes from being very intentional with my time and my priorities. I rely heavily on structure and consistency. What I do is I plan my schedule carefully. I set clear boundaries for different part of my works, and I'm very aware of when something needs my full attention and when something can wait. And I also learned to be realistic. Like I try not to aim for perfection in everything, but like to be steady in my progress. So knowing when to focus deeply and when to step back has been essential to avoiding like burnout, which is something very common right now, and to help me continue to grow. So I've also learned that everything has its own timing. So just because someone reaches a milestone faster or thinks or takes a different pathway doesn't mean that's how it has to be done. Like everyone works differently, learns differently, and grows at their own pace. And respecting that has helped me stay focused on my journey instead of like comparing myself to others.
That's really amazing. And yes, it's definitely important to have balance in everything you do, especially. Sorry about that. I'm at
No, don't
school
worry.
and I'll just start over again. Yeah, that's like definitely so amazing what you're doing, and it's definitely important to have balance in everything you do because, as you mentioned, burnout can easily happen. So, yeah. And finally, to wrap things up, what advice would you give to other students or aspiring healthcare providers who want to combine clinical medicine, research, and global health advocacy?
So I think the biggest advice I would give is to, as I just talked about it, is to trust your own timing and your own path. I will say it again. Well, it took me a long time to understand that just because someone reaches a milestone faster or takes a different route doesn't mean that's how it has to be done. Everyone works differently, learns differently, and grows at their own pace. So respecting that is essential if you want to build something meaningful and like sustainable. Comparing yourself constantly only pulls you away from your purpose. So I say this because of experience. At the beginning of my career, I think I compared myself to others, and I believed that because he was getting better grades, or because he took the exam faster, or he took the step before me, he was doing better. But no, everybody's path and everybody's like learning experience is different from like one another. And another advice, like I'd also say that believe in yourself, even when it feels uncomfortable or uncertain. I believe that if you truly want something and you're really, really willing to work consistently for it, you will get there. Like combining clinical medicine, research, and global health isn't about doing everything at once. It's about like staying committed over time. So what I can say is trust the process, stay curious, and don't underestimate how far like steady effort and self belief can take you.
That is some beautiful advice. Thank you so much, Jimena, for sharing your journey and your insights into women's health, global health, and patient-centered care. Your story was such a powerful reminder that medicine is about seeing the person, advocating for equity, and combining compassion with action. To everyone tuning in, thank you for joining us on this episode of Adolescent Voices. Your support truly means the world to us. If you enjoy this conversation, then be sure to follow, share, and stay tuned for more episodes of Adolescent Voices. We'll see you next time.